Hey, Aaron, are we still given I apologize, I just jumped in. Are we still given the same couple minutes for folks to pile in before we start?
Yep, we are. We're just admitting folks as they join, and so we're just going to give a few minutes for people to join us. And as I mentioned before, too, we are recording, so it'll be available after the meeting as well. We had a lot more registrations for this meeting too, so we might give it a few more minutes to just get people on. Welcome. This is the Ferndale Moves business meeting, so you are in the right place. We're just going to give it a few minutes for other folks to join us. And team, maybe let's give it until maybe 4 or 5 after, and then we can get started and I'll just keep admitting folks as they arrive. So it looks like we have a lot of people who have joined us. If the team is ready to move forward with the presentation, I think that we can jump in. Thank you.
Aaron, I think that's a good call. So thanks, Aaron. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here for our second session of the day for business engagement on Woodward Moves. My name is Jordan Twardy. I am the Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Ferndale. And I'm just going to kick this off with a little bit of housekeeping. If we can move to the next slide. Just going to go over our agenda for the day and a couple sort of Zoom house rules that folks who've been doing this for a little over a year are probably going to be very familiar with. But just for tradition's sake, we'll go through them. So our mayor is going to kick us off and frame the issue, talk a little bit about the history of Woodward and engagement on the conversation we're going to have today in terms of improving it for pedestrians, et cetera. And our planning manager, Justin Lyons, is going to give a presentation about the opportunity before us, some of the trade-offs that we're exploring, the decisions that we're looking at, and the things, frankly, we want your feedback on as a business community and a community at large. And then we're going to open it up into Q&A, do some back and forth questions, get your reactions to what you've seen, take down questions, and then we'll wrap it up with next steps. This won't be the only opportunity to engage. I know Aaron mentioned some of this stuff at the beginning, but there are going to be other opportunities. And if you go to that ferndalemoves.com website, you'll see a lot of that, but we'll talk a little bit about, give you a preview here in today. And with that, if we go to the next slide, just a couple little housekeeping things. So just like any other city meeting, running through the Zoom. So use that chat feature to send us any questions you have throughout the presentation. When we do the Q&A, if you're familiar with it, you can use the raise your hand feature. You get to that by clicking on participants and then clicking on your name. And you should be able to see the little hand button in the white panel that pops up. If that gets cumbersome, doesn't work for some reason, use the chat, drop it in there. But we'll also be posting throughout the presentation email addresses and contact that you can use if you can't get your question to us today. During the presentation, we ask that you please remain muted until you're recognized to speak so we can just keep things moving and give everybody a chance to speak. And then as Aaron mentioned, the meeting is being recorded. We're going to post it up on ferndalemoves.com and we'll provide answers on that page as well to any questions that come up today that we don't get to during the meeting, but we'll have it up there as well as any questions we get after this. And with that, I would.
Hey, Jordan.
Oh, yes.
One quick thing really quick. If you have the updated Zoom, there is actually a different way to raise your hand. At the bottom of your screen, if you hover over it, you'll see an icon that says reactions. It looks like it has a little happy face with a plus sign. If you click that, you can send your praise, heart something or whatever, but there's also a raise your hand at the bottom of that. So it just depends on what version of Zoom you're using right now.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. Certainly out of character for millennial. I'm usually a generation or two behind on software, so I appreciate you giving folks the accurate info. With that, I would like to kick it to Mayor Piana to kick us off formally, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Jordan, and welcome everyone. And thank you for taking time out of your day, our business owners, to learn about some new opportunities that we as a city and our business community can be taking advantage of or leveraging this opportunity. And I know we're at the 1 year mark almost at the pandemic, and I just really wanted to let you know that I recognize a lot of business owners have shifted and adapted to have your business model survive this major disruption, and your resilience inspires me. I'm really glad you're still here and that you're working, your business remains open in Ferndale. So you may have heard that our city, DDA, and chamber have come together in new ways this year to help address the needs of our business owners navigating the pandemic and all of the grant opportunities and new programs coming to support our businesses. They've helped collaboratively together over 400 businesses throughout this past year, and they are here to serve you. And they're coming together again to collaborate around what we're calling Woodward Moves, which is why you're here today. So what we like to do in Ferndale is look ahead and plan ahead. And this is really what we're trying to do because of MDOT. So MDOT is planning to repave Woodward in 2022, and the city is trying to look at how best to collaborate with them to leverage this opportunity because they're going ahead and going to repave in 2022. So I just want to let you know that Woodward has been a passion of mine, particularly around transit since I became on council, and have really been trying to solve these challenges facing Woodward that are impacting our community, our residents, and our businesses. And just a little history, I helped convene businesses back in 2015-16 with the help of Dean Bach from Dino's to have business owners learn about the Woodward Complete Streets Plan and the Woodward Alternative Analysis, which was about bus rapid transit. All this was leading up to the 2016 Regional Transit Ballot Initiative that was failed by 1%. And since then, in the last 5 years, this sort of project in regional transit, sort of what I call political slumber. And I think we'll be having that come back in 2021, late 2021 or early 2022 by the political powers of B, which I call the county executives and regional transit supporters at the higher levels of government. So, but really why we're here is because Ferndale and Woodward Ferndale section of Woodward needs repair. And MDOT owns and manages Woodward. And we're trying to make sure that Ferndale and MDOT can collaboratively work together to get the most benefit about their scheduled construction process. And as you all may know, I think Ferndale may be the only city along the Woodward corridor where our downtown is cut in half through 8 lanes of highway, and 1 is designated as a highway. And so our staff today have created a presentation to talk about some short-term options that coincide with the construction process of MDOT and sort of set a long-term vision where we can help take Woodward into the future. And our business owners have partnered with our city in the downtown before. And I like to hark back to the time when West 9 Mile was 4 lanes and the city had to dig deep underground to fix the sewer and water main lines. And at the time, the business owners supported the city reducing the lanes from 4 to 2. And I think that investment has definitely reaped its benefits over a 20-year period where our downtown was seen as a revitalization success story, where they widened the sidewalks and created a more walkable downtown. And so I see that as a big vision that the community, that the city leaders and the businesses had, that the community got around and invested in. And we're at a, sort of a point where we can start reframing that for Woodward. So I'm going to hand this over to Justin and Aaron to take you through the conversations that we've been having with the community about Woodward Moves. So thank you, Justin. And thank you for being here, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for everyone attending. I appreciate that introduction. Good afternoon. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but as the Mayor said, I'm Justin Lyons, Planning Manager for the city. We've got staff from the Downtown Development Authority, the Ferndale Chamber Area Chamber of Commerce, and then your city staff here. So we will get right into it because I know everyone has a busy afternoon.
One more thing before you start. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I failed to recognize at the beginning that we have joining us Councilman Greg Polika. We also have Councilwoman Laura Mikulski and Councilwoman Kat Bruner James. We technically have a quorum, so there will be no deliberation from our council members today on this topic, but they are more than welcome to ask questions, but we will not be deliberating. And I also want to welcome former Mayor Dan Martin. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Great reminders, Mayor. So as the Mayor discussed, Woodward has came a long way since 1909, but staff found this image that seemed appropriate. It was noting that Woodward was the first mile-long stretch of highway in the nation to get paved. $13,000 was the cost at the time. I don't know that would go as far today, but just thinking about history, part of that history is Woodward Avenue's mostly prioritized vehicles since 1909. So staff, along with all of other community members, business owners, and folks that have weighed in on Woodward over the years, we're thinking about what's next for Woodward from a lens of mobility, safety, economic development, and climate as well. So how can we keep those goals in mind as we plan for the future? Again, we appreciate that you are here as business owners that are located on Woodward or nearby or have some sort of relationship with Woodward and the Ferndale community. So thank you for attending. We really are looking for your feedback related to accessibility, safety, the future of mobility for Woodward and Ferndale in general. We do know that as of right now, the Michigan Department of Transportation, the state's transportation agency, Woodward is their trunk line right of way. And so their planned construction repaving project is in 2022, likely in the spring, and would last until around Labor Day or so. And so that project's happening, and regardless of what we discuss and figure out as a community, but from our perspective, from Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge, who is also part of this overall larger project, how can we better design Woodward that works for all users of the street? So in some of our research, we wanted to just pose this question to folks, sort of a multiple choice question. We'll try and see if this will work through Zoom, but this is an image of the Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge border. And so we wanted to ask folks on the call, can you guess the percentage of space dedicated to people on Woodward Avenue? And so let's just see if this will work, but we have 4 choices for you here, and looking for your response. So we defined percentage of space dedicated to people as typically sidewalks.
Justin, I apologize. It's an error on my side for the poll. So we can have folks type in the chat their answer, or if you are able to engage it.
So sorry about that, folks. If you're able to put your guess in the chat, A, 6%, B, 25%, C, 65%, or D, 75%. What is your guess for percentage of space or sidewalk dedicated to people on Woodward? And we'll just pause for a moment so you can put your guess in the chat.
Lots of 6% coming in. We have a 25%. Another 6%.
All right, last chance for guests in the chat. All right. Does it seem like 6% is the consensus through the chat?
Yep, 6% it is.
All right, so it turns out you folks do know Woodward pretty well. So 6% is generally for this for much of Woodward, that is the approximate percentage of space dedicated to people on Woodward. So despite that very, very wide, 200-foot wide right-of-way, I think most of us would probably experience that the existing sidewalks are narrow, can be crowded at times with pedestrians, people riding bikes, benches, light poles, sidewalk cafes, all vying for that tight space. There can be some varied uneven pavement and many obstacles that can make that sidewalk challenging to navigate. The roadway for travel lanes is pretty wide with 4 lanes of traffic. Some of those lanes are 11 to 12 to 13 feet wide, which really seems to encourage unsafe speeds. There's some challenges with merging around bridges, and it really creates that intimidating barrier that I think a lot of people have felt when you're trying to get from one side of Woodward to the other. There's a narrow separation between the sidewalk and traffic that makes the environment pretty loud if you're sitting on a sidewalk cafe or walking to businesses. And when we're thinking about multimodal opportunities, people that ride bikes, I'm sure we've all seen a few brave souls riding in the travel lane, but those are likely pretty confident and experienced type of bicycle riders. So that shifts a lot of people riding bikes to that sort of 6-foot space on the sidewalk. So just affirming what we know today, if there's anything that you leave this meeting with, we want you to know, and we wanted to let you know as soon as we did know that MDOT will be resurfacing or repaving Woodward in 2022. It's considered a maintenance project for them. So the state is funding and managing basic work, which is just milling the asphalt surface down an inch or two, and completing some ADA updates like crosswalk ramps where needed. Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge at the same time over the years have been planning and looking at traffic studies, trying to figure out a way to make Woodward safe. And then, we know that basically our communities would be required to pay for any additional modifications if we decide to go forward with anything else. This timeline speaks to a lot of what the mayor had mentioned about the long history of planning for Woodward. It goes back over 20 years. There was the work done by the Regional Transit Authority, as mentioned by the mayor, and Complete Streets and locally preferred transit analysis that was done. There's a lot of references to Woodward in the city's master plan that talks about improving safety on Woodward. And more recently, Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge were awarded some grant funding to look at bicycling and walking safety in a safety audit in 2018 and 2019. So a community survey was done at the time. There was a walking audit where people walked and actually, experienced Woodward just during rush hour on a rainy April or May day. So that was, giving people a real life experience of that. There was, at the same time, in November 2019, MDOT was proposing initially for the project to happen in 2021 due to local construction on I-75, a massive overrun of budget on the MDOT side, local construction here with roads, and the DOT, Pleasant Ridge and Ferndale said, hey, if there's a way for us to pause, let's look at this a little bit further and think about the long-term ramifications. So that led to Pleasant Ridge and Ferndale doing a traffic study that we'll talk about more, where we looked at actual traffic data. The city of Ferndale is also in the process, started in summer and still doing updating the Ferndale Moves citywide mobility and transportation plan. and then continued working to MDOT trying to find out when they would get funding and when they would know for sure about construction date. So we're actually right here in this January engagement. We've had some engagement in December with the wider community focusing on businesses today. There will likely be more meetings ahead. So I don't want anyone on the call to think this is the last time to give input. We're working towards a potential grant application in late February to help fund some of things that hopefully the community believes in and staff recommends going forward. And then the late dates here, August is for some construction timing or documents timing. And then in 2022, ignore the 2023 there. 2022 is when the project would happen. At least the resurfacing project would happen. So not to get into a lot of the big details on the safety study and the lane reduction or traffic feasibility study, condensing a lot of pages of data into one here, but all of this information will be posted on ferndalemoves.com. The safety study from 2018-2019 found that there were over 800 crashes between 2016 and 2018. Now that 2019 data is out, it's probably higher, which we can look into, but most of the crashes occurred at some of these major intersections. So in Pleasant Ridge, you had the 10-mile intersection, and then Drayton, Camborne, and 9-mile in Ferndale. The study sort of affirmed long wait times for pedestrians to cross Woodward Avenue when they're going east to west, and that crosswalks are pretty far apart, more than 300 feet from each other. So that means if you're, between 9-mile and College Street, that's a long ways to go. And so some people, I think, as we've seen, have, skipped a crosswalk altogether and just ran across, unfortunately. Lack of comfort in walking was also a theme of the survey and all the study information from the safety study. For the traffic study, it was called the Road Diet Feasibility Study. It analyzed how traffic would be affected by removing a northbound and southbound lane on Woodward Avenue. The study's parameters were set up with MDOT's engineering team. And so a key element of that study was a term in traffic engineering called level of service. Essentially, level of service is a A to F grading scale for vehicle delay, and MDOT's criteria generally hopes for a C or better in most intersections. So the study found that if the communities were to remove one travel lane on each side of Woodward, the level of service would meet that standard. And the study included a general short-term design that you'll see on the upcoming slides that has some bicycling, pedestrian, transit improvements, as well as keeping the majority of the parking as well that's on street. So this is our other touch point where we wanted to, when we looked at data, we thought it was interesting. So I wanted to ask the group, and feel free to put your answer in the chat box, but what percentage of vehicle capacity is being used on Woodward each day? So essentially, Woodward is designed to fit a certain number of cars. How much of that capacity do you think that we are, that is being utilized right now? So we have A, 10%, B, 42%, C, 80%, and D, 100%.
All right, we have a 80% guess, 42% guess, another 42%.
I guess I should
42%.
have said too, if you joined for the morning meeting and you're here again, don't spoil it for the rest of the group. don't share your answers.
A lot of folks saying 42% so far.
Okay. So with 42% being the consensus, we'll just confirm that. So if you're familiar with people talking about having enough parking for Black Friday, that's sort of a comparison I think about when I think of Woodward Avenue's road capacity. So the daily volume is 42,000 roughly. And then all 8 lanes, the actual capacity is over 100,000. Woodward feels like a highway at times due to the number of lanes and asphalt, and that's sort of reflective in the road capacity there. Those daily volumes When you look at regional population data, it would be very surprising for Woodward to actually come close to that number, which is partially why I believe the state did expand I-75 to be that wider highway type of volume. So if the numbers of Woodward aren't coming close to that capacity, why should we continue to keep thinking about the layout that way? Is something we had in mind. So based on the data and the upcoming MDOT project, we see this as an opportunity for the future, short-term and long-term, as the mayor mentioned. So if the cities are able to leverage the project that is about to happen, is there a way to set Woodward up for people and vehicles, just not solely vehicles? So we sort of see that as short-term opportunities and long-term opportunities. We'll get into that a little bit more, but in the short term, some of those, both categories, some of those items are goals that apply really to short-term and long-term. From a safety perspective, accessibility, climate, aesthetics, our opportunity, we feel, is to plan for that right now. So getting into more of that, some potential short-term modifications that we would consider, could consider, is the reduction of a travel lane. And I'll have another image on the next slide, but of one travel lane, both on north and southbound sides of Woodward. This would allow for a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians at intersections. This would add a parking protected bike lane that would be on the north and south side of Woodward. Allow for thinking about and reviewing intersections to be safer and apply more design items for visibility. And then, of course, no matter what, new asphalt and new ADA ramps, that is a given that will be part of the Woodward, MDOT project. So we know that there's different context throughout Woodward. So this is primarily the concept, but we know that there are some modifications we'd have to make for certain parts of Woodward where there are bridges and different layouts. But generally, the goal would be to use the existing curb, gutter, and sidewalk to remove one lane from Woodward and convert it to an actual different use as a bike lane, but also to increase the, shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians. Up top here is sort of a, as if you were standing on Woodward, a cross-section view, and then above is sort of a overhead sight view. But essentially with a parking protected bike lane that is roughly 8 feet, there would be a 2 foot, median of some sort, buffer of some sort. So that would allow for 8 to 10 feet that shortens the crossing distance for pedestrians, which is pretty substantial on each side of Woodward. That allows people to feel safer when crossing, give a little bit more time and less pressure to travel when they're crossing both sides of Woodward. The existing, there would be three travel lanes remaining. Parking would generally remain. It would just be placed in the former outer travel lane. A two-way separated bike lane would provide a more comfortable, intuitive access to businesses on Woodward, shifting most of the sidewalk or bicycle traffic off of sidewalk, giving more space to pedestrians. And just by removing lane, that also helps promote safer speeds, and hopefully we can address some of the merging issues and intersection issues for drivers. These are just some examples of what this short-term type of implementation could look like. These are examples from around the country, but also we know City of Detroit has done some similar things like this on Jefferson that seem to have worked so far, but there are some iterations with larger bollards. There's parking blocks that you can use. So things that we're all exploring right now. I'll show this slide, but also I think the next slide probably explains it a little bit better, but I think most people are probably familiar with turning right off of a side street onto Woodward. Currently right now, this is on Lewiston Street. West Lewiston. Drivers stop behind a crosswalk. Sometimes they crowd the crosswalk is what I've seen. And it's tough for people in cars to see past buildings, also because of the angle of Woodward as it stands today. Our goal would be the new condition, which is, like I said, better to show on the next slide, but would allow for the crosswalk to be moved farther back, be a little bit wider, and drivers would stop beyond the crosswalk and have a more unobstructed view, sort of in a two-stage phase. We've also heard a lot of questions about, should some parking be removed right at corners? And potentially, I think we're going to look at all of those intersections on a case-by-case basis. But sometimes the parking that's existing on Woodward now is probably a little bit too close for safe driving and visibility. So this is more of probably more concrete in this drawing than would be completed in a short-term design, but a lot of this can be accomplished in a similar fashion in the short term with paint and other materials. So this design essentially allows for a wider crosswalk for people using the sidewalk, people on bikes, and a car would essentially yield before the crosswalk, but then they would pull out, and it puts them out a little bit more in line with the parked vehicles, but there would be fewer parked cars close to the sidewalk, or the corner. So a little bit of less obstruction there. Allows more space for drivers turning off of Woodward as well. That physically there's just less space for them to go. So it would slow people down turning onto side streets. The curb is extended here a bit here, which would shorten the crossing distance for people on the sidewalk here as well. There's opportunities where, on a spot basis, I think there's some areas where we could do some green stormwater infrastructure to help with drainage on Woodward. Something that we'd have to look at on a case-by-case basis, but something that I think the community's asked for in the past as well. We think that this may be there's obviously a little bit of education that goes with this, but maybe a little bit more intuitive and help lessen some of that obstruction at intersections. This next slide shows examples of traffic signal intersections. So 9 Mile, Camborne, College, and Oakland Park, some of those examples. So this would be a better design that would factor in all users of the street. So many intersections already have no turn on red signage. So in theory, people should already be keeping the crosswalks clear. In this example, there is similarly a wider crosswalk, giving more of that priority to pedestrians and people on bikes as the more vulnerable users there. So there's an opportunity to look at a few different treatments depending on the intersection, but the goal would be just to improve visibility and safety for everyone. And then another option that we're talking about with SMART, because we know that Woodward is a pretty popular transit corridor. And so we are looking at different opportunities to create bus stops. So this is a sort of a more high-end bus stop, but something that Smart Bus is interested in helping design to get people to and from Ferndale safely. But there's opportunity for some green stormwater infrastructure. There's opportunity to really relocate the bus shelter, hopefully provide some lighting. Hopefully provide a little bit more space from existing buildings. So that's something worth looking at, particularly for the higher frequency buses or bus stops, I should say. And these are just examples of other approaches throughout the country of how you can do that, whether it be a raised bus island or raising a bike lane, adding some green stormwater infrastructure. But I think something probably like this example is something that we could work on to help people get to and from whether riding the bus or traveling safely around the bus stop. So we keep talking about short-term and long-term, and definitely want to leave time to talk about this a little bit more with the group. But we do see this just due to the timeline of MDOT's existing project, budget restraints, and and just the overall scope of MDOT's project. We know there are certain items that we can address on Woodward now. This allows us to test items in the short-term column and determine how the corridor could evolve when the time comes. MDOT has kind of said, and they've said this for a while, I think that 10 to 15 years is their range for a reconstruction where they would build sidewalks and stuff like that. I would love for that to be now, but unfortunately that's not what it is right now. So focusing on these short-term items, I think can lead towards a more long-term vision where we talk about expanding sidewalks or adding additional crosswalks and more stormwater infrastructure and hopefully some transit improvements and likely autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles happening as well. I know there's some studies of that going on Michigan Avenue and Woodward and elsewhere, but so focusing on the short term, I think can help accomplish a lot of those long-term goals. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this image, but this was from a study done a couple of years ago that aligns with some past studies that shows, for the long-term vision, if you were to reconstruct sidewalks, this allows you to, even get even more space for sidewalks, possibly adding green stormwater infrastructure. But it has a lot of principles that are connected to the short-term project, I would say. And these are just examples from cities like Minneapolis where they've tested things and then turned into this bigger capital type of project where they have planted new trees. There are multi-use paths that are shared by bikes or separated for pedestrians, adding outdoor street furniture and things like that. So something that we think is part of the long term that if we focus on the short term, we can eventually get to this. But I didn't want to spend the entire time talking here. So we did want to open it up for a quick question and answer session. Again, this is sort of a high level short-term concept that we're exploring further, but we want to learn how these short-term types of designs may help your patrons and people that visit your business. So we do have 3 questions that we had in mind for you to think about, and we can open things up for questions with the hand raise feature. But our general Q&A initial questions were, do you think your patrons right now are being impacted by unsafe intersections and crossings on Woodward? Would your business benefit from vehicles being further away from the sidewalk? And then, long term, I know we're talking a lot about short term, but what is your vision long term? What would you like to see on Woodward? So I think that is generally what we're starting, but we can absolutely cover more ground. And again, this won't be the only opportunity to discuss ideas.
Thanks, Justin. Do you want to maybe stop sharing your screen so we can get to the gallery view? And then if folks are comfortable, we can turn on our cameras and have like a little bit more discussion. And I do see someone with their hand raised already too. So whenever we're ready, we can
Great.
with that. So the first person with their hand raised, perhaps they have a question, is Jared.
Well, I didn't really have a question. Hi, everybody. Had more of I just had some comments in response to those questions about what are safety issues and how our customers and whatnot would benefit. So by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jared Rapp. I'm one of the owners of Traverse City Whiskey Co. And I'm the one who, at least especially most recently, has been as most hands-on with our outpost, which is at 9 Mile and Woodward, just north of Woodward, in the former Como's Bar. And while I've been down there, I have had the unfortunate experience of being able to witness a couple of pedestrian accidents in the intersection during the day, at night. One of them looked pretty serious. So, I think anything that is able to reduce the speed of that intersection is a huge win. If we can slow down traffic on Woodward, I think it will give the area, more of a romantic feel. And I think that's definitely positive. So, shrinking the street, slowing down traffic, those things are both positive. One thing that is absolutely crushing us is the bus shelter that's directly in front of our business and blocks substantially all of our facade. Even more so with a garbage can that blocks about 1/3 of the remaining sidewalk between the businesses and the can. It prevents us And if it was anywhere else, it would prevent any other business from really, at least in this type of design, from having meaningful use on that street and having a nice sidewalk cafe opportunities. I mean, from our standpoint, it basically makes it impossible for us. And I know that, we wouldn't want it to be in front of anyone else's business where they'd have the same problem. So anything that moves that further away and creates the ability to have more of I like to use the word romantic because that's how I think of it, sort of like a Parisian, kind of an atmosphere, but just something that's more upscale. It allows us to have a nice experience seating people there, especially now because a lot of our customers are scared to come inside, and we're scared that we may be shut down for even longer. So that in the near term would be great. In the long term, it's a great thing to keep on the radar. Another thing I was going to say, I had a couple of notes. We're wondering why you guys are not utilizing the median more. It's a really, really big median. And I just feel like that the median might not have been explored as much as it could be. I think that I've seen medians in other cities where maybe if you take away a lane from each direction of traffic, you could, for every foot of sidewalk you increase, you also increase the median and create sort of a kind of a park atmosphere in there. Maybe the bike trails could go through the median. Maybe we could reduce some of the Michigan lefts and have a better experience that way. So that was just another idea that I thought might benefit not just the businesses on Woodward, but also the community at large. So that's pretty much all of my thoughts for now. And I don't know. Feel free to ask me any questions if you got any. All right, but thank you for hosting this meeting.
Thank you. We appreciate the comments. Justin, would you like to respond to anything, or do you just want to take the next questions that we have?
Let's take the next questions too. I wrote down everything Jared said, and I should have added to, there will be more frequently asked questions added after this meeting, just for the folks that weren't able to attend who may have the same questions as well. But I appreciate that feedback so far, Jared.
Cool, thanks, Justin.
Great, so the next hand raise is Jim and Nicole.
Hello, thank you for hosting this forum today. Question that I had, and kind of builds off of some of the last comments, was in the interest of slowing down Woodward, as well as expanding some sidewalk cafe space. I understand the curbs are going to stay put with this MDOT construction, and I understand it's limited to just milling the existing surface, but how narrow could the lanes be, both in the interest of slowing that traffic and the interest of gaining a few feet for an eventual expansion in that 10 to 15 year plan of those sidewalk cafes, perhaps? That's as much as I thought to ask here. Is they're currently at 11 to 12 feet. What's the bare minimum they could be to meet the traffic volume and speeds that are required?
Great, thank you. The next hand raise that we have is Jerome.
How are you? Interesting concept. Having been around the community for quite some time, obviously, I go back to when the medians were parking areas. So that was a few years back. Some of you may remember that, I'm not sure. But my question really is more geared towards, as we focus on some adjustments to Woodward, which I think are viable and valid, are we also keeping in mind that I feel, although it's already happening, it will continue to increase, and that is the use of Hilton. So I would be concerned as to, as much as we're focusing on Woodward, what as a community are we doing about Hilton? Although not an MDOT road there, I do see increased traffic over there. So you could look at it as a negative or a positive. Certainly the businesses along that strip have increased. And just was curious if we're keeping that in mind as well, because when you push traffic from one area to another, we need to keep a broader vision on that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Jadana, is it Jadana? Did I pronounce that correctly? I think that you had a question.
Yes, hi. Hi, I'm Jadana Dingus. I'm the owner of Margot and Max. Well, my concern is about parking. How's the parking going to be impacted? And then also, as much as obviously, construction is always a disruption to business. It has to happen because Woodward is really, people drive so fast on Woodward. Sometimes I miss my turnaround because you're trying to avoid being hit. Because I do travel Woodward a lot, to go back and forth to my business and going to 696, people drive way too fast. So that's my concern about whether parking, we're going to lose parking spaces. Is it really going to slow down the traffic? And I'm always concerned about, getting in and out of, the cars, parking along Woodward and the safety there as well. And I think the pedestrian safety is a huge issue as well. I was glad to hear you discuss how far away the crosswalks are from one another, but traffic just moves way, way too fast on Woodward. So I'll be happy to hear how what the plan is and how to slow traffic down a bit. Thanks.
Thank you. So it doesn't look like we have any other hands raised at this time. Justin, did you want to respond to any of the questions that we had so far? And then people can kind of think of additional questions, and we can also pose the questions that we had to get some feedback on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the median suggestion is a good one. And I think a lot of us have thought about the median and the potential of that initially as well. But I think you mentioned it, Jared, the number of Michigan lefts. It is problematic for having a walking path or biking path or what have you in the middle of the median. But that was part of the Regional Transit Authority's plan for having bus rapid transit and stops be in the median and getting rid of Michigan lefts. So if there's a larger regional plan, I think that is something that maybe you could pair together. But I think that, for that larger reconstruction project, it should be talked about along with transit. I think Jim and Nicole, your question was a good one about the width for lanes. In the city, we typically like to have 10-foot lanes. Since this is MDOT right of way, the lanes that they would propose are 11 two 11-foot lanes, and then one 12-foot lane near the Michigan lefts. It's still too wide in my opinion, and just based on a lot of transportation research. I don't know that, I think that there's a statewide standard, but that's something I could double check with. But there's a lot of research out there that basically shows that you don't need more than 10 feet. Sometimes for transit potentially, but not for typical travel lanes. Jerome's question also was good, and I like the wider scope. We've been talking about Hilton a lot on the Ferndale Moves Mobility Plan, so I'll carry those comments over to that plan as well. But I think that 2023 or 2024 potentially is when Hilton may be resurfaced. Don't quote me on that officially, but that's something where we would like to get with all the businesses and community members nearby and start thinking about that as well. Probably next year to start planning for that and see what that could look like. And then Jadana, great to see you. Your questions absolutely make sense about parking. I think that generally the parking would remain. And in fact, if we could get some driveways, I think narrowed probably to a more appropriate width, there could be more opportunity. But I think that really the only areas that we've talked about removing parking would be if it's very close to an intersection where, maybe it's not such a big of space. Maybe we can narrow or make it smaller enough so we're in compact car or something like that, so it's not totally lost. But we're kind of at the stage where if we were able to get to this late February type of time frame, that's when we can go further on the deeper dive into like intersection by intersection and see all those unique situations. So thank you.
Justin. So with that, then, did anybody else have any other questions? We did have a call-in as well. I'm not sure if that's someone that's on, but we have a call-in that with the ending numbers of 959. If that person has any questions or would like to contribute, you can feel free to do so now. Otherwise, you can raise your hands by either clicking the participants tab or that reactions icon at the bottom of your screen.
This is the call-in, Patty Aberlich. I grew up in Ferndale and have an immediate interest in what's going on with Woodward Avenue. It's my history. And I play in the Ferndale Community Concert Band, so I am back in Ferndale all the time. I live in Milford, which has a great downtown area as well. And I'm concerned about the look of Woodward and the safety. I don't think bike path is an appropriate use of the lanes on Woodward because, as someone else mentioned, you know, people drive very fast. I think 45 miles an hour is the speed limit of most of Woodward. Not right downtown Woodward, but Ferndale rather. But that's my concern, the safety of bikers. And you're going to use the median for the bike path. And since every other street in Ferndale has bike paths now, pretty much, why would you need a bike path on Woodward? And is there a rendering that you have already that would show what you're planning to do with Woodward?
Justin, do you mind if I answer? Patty, thank you for joining us and being concerned about Woodward. It is a regional highway that a lot of people use, and I'm glad you're here and expressing your concerns. I noticed that you're calling in, so you may have not seen the presentation that was part of this Zoom call. And so I encourage you to go to our website. You can go to Ferndale Moves at the end of this call, and you'll be able to see the renderings. And I just wanted to let you know that the speed limit in Ferndale is different from the rest of Woodward. It's 35 miles per hour and the average speed is 10 over. So people are driving a lot faster than what the speed limits are posted. But I really thank you for your time and your question today.
Well, and my daughter lives in Pleasant Ridge, so I am over there all the time.
Yep, and just to let you know that the bike lanes would be on Woodward, and when cyclists, people biking, are separated from people walking, it is safer for them. And right now, there's no place for them to safely bike. So this is one of the areas that we're exploring, and we'll be continuing to identify how best to structure that design going forward. But go to the website, you'll see all the designs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patty. And I'm happy to give you a call this week as well and talk through any questions you might have. This is Justin from the city, in case you can't see me. So.
Yes, and I reached out. I've planned the last 4 or 5 class reunions for Ferndale. I'm very involved in the alumni. And so I did spread the word, if you will, about this call today with some alumni friends that live locally still, and thought that they might be interested in hearing your presentation. I don't know if any of them joined, but I thought I would jump on when I was available and find out if there's any leave behind or presentation that I could forward on to them. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And can I just say, Erin, one last thing. I just really appreciate all of the business owners being here and contributing your input, because this is a significant change to the street. I get it. But it's one that, you know, our residents and business owners have been voicing concerns and complaints about for 20 years. I feel like we're on repeat and and without the opportunity to really do a lot. And so I call this the sort of like the NASA, you know, re-entry window for a spaceship that has to come in at a certain time and point into the atmosphere, re-entry into the atmosphere. And if you don't get the timing right, you miss it and you go back into orbit. And that's sort of how I feel about this project, is that if we don't take advantage of this opportunity with MDOT repaving, we go back into orbit and we go back to another, you know, decade-long complaint list from residents and business owners about what's not working for Woodward. And I always say, I'm very upfront, is like, I don't know what we can afford to do. That is part of this process over the next 6 months. And what the city can afford to do and the grant money we raise is going to determine what is actually put down on the corridor. So staff have a lot of work to do of combining all your comments and coming to a consensus and negotiate with MDOT, as well as meet the needs of the community. And I feel like they have a very fine needle to thread, and I am supporting our staff as much as possible, because this is the direction of council, so that we don't miss this opportunity. We need to leverage it and figure out what we can do. And I really appreciate your support, and I hope you'll join the city in supporting the end proposed product that is going to be, done for 2022. And we're going to need your voice going forward over the next 6 months as we figure this out. And I hope you'll be part of the process and continuing to show support for these changes, whatever the community and what we can afford to do is determined. So thank you for being here, and reach out to me or staff with any of your concerns and questions going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Really quick, we only have about 3 minutes left. If you did not pre-register for this, please type in your email address into the chat so we can have provide any follow-up to you all, as well as if you're interested in kind of keeping up to date on anything. We did have a question typed into the chat, so I want to get to that. And then if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to raise your hand. We do just have a few minutes left. So the question was, what is the TAP grant and what input is needed? And I think this is a perfect Justin question.
Sounds good. And there's maybe Jim and Nicole maybe saw my presentation earlier, because it's well timed with this slide. So the TAP grant is a Transportation Alternatives Program grant. So it's a federal grant that is funneled through the state of Michigan. The city has been very successful in getting over $1 million for past projects like Woodward Heights or Livernois, some bike route signage and things like that. So, and Mogo Bike Share over the years. So our goal is to, continue this engagement over this month. There's a community-wide meeting on January 27th at 6:30 p.m. That anyone is welcome to join. And so we're trying to get more feedback at those sessions. But the TAP grant, we would like to hopefully get the community and council support for in late February. And that then we would apply for the grant later that week. And so that would really help, because those grants are meant for alternatives, transportation alternatives. So that helps fund bike lane striping, curb fixing for bus stops, ADA improvements, more signage, stuff like that. So it is pretty crucial in helping us leverage as a community this project that MDOT's got going on. So a well-timed question.
This is Patty Aberlich. Is there a consistency with the design or rendering as we go north through the other cities, so that it's cohesive with the other cities' plans? I don't know if that's a possibility, but.
Sure. Yeah, so we are working directly with Pleasant Ridge on this project. And so MDOT's focus for this project has been just basically 696 to 8 Mile. The city of Detroit, they don't have anything completely planned and ready, but they're looking to do similar things that we are as well. And Royal Oak and Birmingham, they have a little different type of design, or setup of Woodward, I would say, than we do. The mayor kind of mentioned earlier about our downtown being, bisected by Woodward. And so, I think there was a cohesive plan, I would say, with the regional transit plan that was proposed a few years ago. I think, there will be something comes back like that in the future. But right now we're trying to take, I think this opportunity with this piece with Pleasant Ridge and Ferndale partnering.
Justin, if I can follow up, I'm going to use my space analogy here. I wish all the stars and moons and planets aligned, and that the transit initiatives with our street repaving all were coming together perfectly for one investment time of construction. Unfortunately, the stars, planets, and the moons did not align. And what is alignment though is Ferndale with MDOT repaving. And so we're taking a look at what we can do now with a forward looking to if any new investment is coming together. And like Ferndale has always done in the past, and what we do in the present is that we try to best weave together all the components so that it works for the community. And I think that's what we'll do if and when the transit millage passes in the future. So, thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. We're happy to stick around, but we did fill up all of our time. If anyone has extra questions, we're happy to stick around. We'll be sending out a survey, and later today, ferndalemoves.com will have the survey as well as this presentation. So just want to make sure folks are familiar with that website. And if you're not, or have questions about it, please contact Aaron or myself.
And just another plug, if you did not pre-register for this and you would like to stay in contact, please enter your email into the chat and we will make sure to keep you informed about any future engagement opportunities as well as the survey and so forth.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Justin, Aaron, and Jordan. You guys rock. And with Lena, thank you for convening this meeting today with our business owners.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Have a great Tuesday.
See you. You guys rock. Nice job, everybody.
Yep. Bye.
Great
Thank
job.
you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Cheers.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Good to see you, you too.